Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Warriors, your daily Golden State Warriors podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Warriors, your daily podcast on all things Warriors, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm Wes Goldberg, Warriors beat writer for the Bay Area News Group. Thanks for tuning in on YouTube or listening on your podcast feed, wherever you get podcasts. Got an awesome show for you today. We're going to get into some mailbag questions. Got questions about more potential offseason moves for the Warriors, their rotation going into next season, some stuff on James Wiseman. Got a lot of great stuff that we're going to get to, but want to hit this Andre Iguodala thing first. Andre Iguodala coming back to Golden State. Iguodala will sign a one-year minimum contract with the Warriors. It reportedly came down to Brooklyn and maybe even the Lakers were getting involved there, but ultimately Iguodala seemed like he had the Warriors planned all along. He did this big interview with Jonathan Abrams with the New York Times. And look, you don't really do that sort of thing unless you're pretty sure that you're going to do that. They had the Friday morning news dump on the New York Times story. Feels like this thing was always sort of leaning in that direction. Anyway, and I think the Warriors' move to trade Eric Paschall a couple of days ago, clear a potential roster spot, was a sign that they thought that somebody was coming, and most certainly, I guess, that player was Iguodala. So Iguodala will sign a one-year veteran minimum contract. Not going to get a portion of that mid-level exception. I know that's something that I've talked about, something a lot of people are wondering. Can Iguodala leverage the Lakers and the Nets against the Warriors? And I said if he could, more power to him, right? Like, go get your money, man. I'm not going to say not to do that, but I did think that could, maybe make the Warriors pause on the idea of bringing Iguodala back because he's 37 years old, not the player that he was during the height of the Warriors dynasty, but still really helpful. And that's what I want to talk more about. What will Iguodala be for these Warriors? Now, he's 37 years old, had a pretty rough year last year in Miami. So after the Warriors traded him away in 2019, so remember 2019 finals, Kevin Durant, Klay Thompson, they get hurt. Warriors lose the finals to the Raptors. Kevin Durant signs with Brooklyn. They trade Iguodala to Memphis in order to facilitate that sign-and trade that brought D'Angelo Russell to Golden State. D'Angelo Russell becomes Andrew Wiggins and then basically Jonathan Kuminga and all these things. Okay, it was a good move. It was the right move, but Iguodala didn't play in Memphis. He refused basically to play, and the Grizzlies eventually traded him to Miami during the 2020 NBA trade deadline, and then he's a big part of that run for the Heat in the bubble and in the playoffs, and helps them get to the finals. And he was really good for them. He played 21 games in the regular season for them, was a really important player for them in the playoffs, the kind of player that Warriors fans have seen over and over again. And then last year, short turnaround, he's 37 years old, kind of a weird year for the Heat in general, not nearly as good as he was. He only averaged 4.4 points, 3.5 rebounds, and 2.3 assists in 63 games last year. And shot, and this is the worrying part for me, a career low 38% overall. 38% overall. Now, Andre Iguodala's never been a great scorer, but like in 6 years at the Warriors, he shot 48%, 46.6%, 47.8%, 52.8%, 46.3%, and then 50%, right? So 38% is way below his average. I mean, for his career, he's a 46% shooter. 38% is bad no matter what. So he was basically one of the worst offensive players in the league last year. And defensively, obviously there's still things that he can give you, but just it's more flashes, less consistent, less regular than what he was doing in 6 years with Golden State. So all of that said, I do think Iguodala will play an important role. I don't think that this is just, hey, come on in, man. We'd love to have you back. It's a great story. You're going to mentor the young guys, and he will, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But I do think that he could still play. I still think he can give them something. Let's remember, like I said, really short turnaround going from 2 seasons ago to last season. For a guy like Iguodala, that was probably really, really hard, despite having taken that first year of 2019 off. Like that just doesn't really matter. So I expect us to bounce back year. I mean, all those career lows, you expect things to decline a little bit with age, But that seemed to me a little jarring, right? And I do think it was just a weird year for Iguodala and for the Heat, and it was just weird for a lot of players on that team regressed, right? And so it's not just Iguodala. So, and it can't just be like something in the water. I don't see that being the case. So, I think he'll bounce back a little bit. Not going to be the player that he was when he was winning, Finals MVPs and all those things, but the Warriors didn't add a backup point guard in free agency, and I don't know that there is one, and we do have a mailbag question about that. But I think, for all intents and purposes, Iguodala is going to essentially be your backup point guard. Like, he's going to be the guy that comes in when Steph isn't on the floor, who can maybe stabilize those second unit offenses, help Jordan Poole play off the ball a little bit more, play in a unit with a lot of young guys, right? If Moses Moody's going to be part of that, if Juan Anderson, maybe James Wiseman will be a part of that group. You could see Iguodala kind of being the veteran leader in those situations, and it's something that I think the Warriors really needed last year. I also think that you're going to see Iguodala play quite a bit with Steph, Klay, and Draymond. I think we're going to see that. I don't know what it's going to look like, but I do think we'll see it early, and Steve Kerr will get a sense of what that is. And in certain games, right, we could see like the death lineup return. Like if it's a night where Iguodala is playing well, and the Warriors need to go into a small ball lineup in crunch time, we could see Steph, Klay, Iguodala, Wiggins in that Harrison Barnes, Kevin Durant spot, and Draymond Green on the floor, right? And that's something we talked about with Otto Porter when they signed him, is that he could be part of those lineups. I think he could still be part of those lineups. I don't think bringing in Iguodala changes that. I just don't think it's going to be like what it was, where you just pencil in, okay, these are the closing five every single night. Most teams don't operate that way. The Warriors did for a really long time, but most teams don't operate that way. It's going to be matchup based. It's going to be hot hand based, things like that. Who's playing well? Those are our guys that we're closing with. And in certain lineups, you could still see Jordan Poole being in that closing lineup and them going super small if they want more scoring on the floor. So I think Iguodala is going to play a role. I just don't think it's going to be the souped up six-man, pencil him in for 24 minutes every night, closing lineup every night. No, it's not going to be that Iguodala, but he will play. And I think he's going to be a really important mentor for these guys. Obviously, Moses Moody. Obviously, Jonathan Kuminga. Like, that goes without saying. I think his leadership will help a guy like James Wiseman, who doesn't play his position, but that doesn't really matter. Like, sometimes you just need a guy with leadership skills who can help guys buy in. Like, let's remember, Iguodala, and Steve Kerr credits Iguodala all the time. He kind of unlocked that unselfish ethos that Steve Kerr brought and tried to bring to Golden State when he got hired half a decade ago, because Iguodala agreed to come off the bench. A guy who has been an all-star, a career starter, agreed to come off the bench. I think that kind of stuff could be really helpful to this team. I also really like the idea of Andre Iguodala taking a guy like Jordan Poole under his wing, because Jordan Poole and Andre Iguodala, being around those two guys, there's similarities there, right? There's like this confidence, unwavering confidence, self-assuredness, a little like pompous, and I don't see that in a bad way, but they kind of carry themselves with like that swagger, and I think Poole will gravitate to a guy like Andre Iguodala, and we've seen when Poole has the right leadership and the right guidance that he could be a really effective player for the Warriors. So I think Iguodala would be really helpful for Jordan Poole as well. So that's my Andre Iguodala thing. Obviously, we'll be talking about this a lot over the next few days, over the next season. It's and last thing on it, it's just great to have him back. Like, that's a lot of fun. It's kind of just a feel-good reunion. But again, I don't think Iguodala is just going to come in and play some sort of 15th guy, not really play, more of like a coach in the locker room. No, I don't. I think he's going to play, and I think he's going to help at times. Today's episode is brought to you by Built Bar. Did you know that Built Bar has a ton of delicious flavors? There's something for everybody. When you talk to a Built Bar fan, they are definitely passionate about their faves. And if you don't know the Built Bar flavors, well, you are missing out. They have coconut, they have cherry barcia, raspberry, mint brownie, double chocolate. They have salted caramel, strawberry, orange, cookies and cream, and German chocolate. My personal favorite is any of the fruit ones that are covered in chocolate. That's a winning formula, fruit covered in chocolate. How do you beat it? They have the newer one of that group is the strawberry, and that's like a chocolate-covered strawberry. My go-tos have been orange and raspberry for a really long time. I'm really into the cherry barcia lately. And if you haven't tried all of the flavors, you can get a mixed box where you're going to get 2 each of 9 flavors, so that'll help you pick a favorite. Not only Our Built Bar flavors the best tasting. They're healthy too. Check out these macros: 17 to 18 grams of protein, calories ranging from 130 to 180, only 4 to 5 grams of sugar, only 4 to 5 grams of net carbs. They're amazing flavors. They're all tasty. They're all healthy. I'm telling you guys, you've heard me talk about Built Bars a ton over the last year or two. I eat them nearly every single day, especially on days where I'm working out and stuff. It's just a really easy way and tasty way to just get a bunch of protein all at once. So you can go to built.com, use that promo code LOCKED15, and you're going to get 15% off on your order. Again, use that promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com. All right, back here with Locked On Warriors. Let's get to the mailbag. Got a bunch of really great questions. This first one comes from @TheCycleStrikes. Once Klay Thompson is back in that lineup, do you think that will help or hurt Andrew Wiggins? It seems like Wiggins wouldn't take advantage of the extra space to attack the rim, and if Klay is the number 2 option, what does Wiggins look like as a number 3? If he could play defense and still shoot 38%, I love it, but someone needs to be able to get to the rim and draw fouls. No one on the team profiles as this player besides Steph and Kuminga eventually if things go well. So first of all, once Klay comes back, I don't know that he's the number 2 option. We don't know what Klay Thompson looks like when he comes back, right? I think we all assume and like for Klay Thompson to be the number 2 option, because if that's true, it means things have gone well with his rehab, and he does look like the Klay Thompson that we last saw in 2019. But that's not a guarantee. So don't be so sure to say, yeah, Klay Thompson comes back and then Wiggins is bumped back down in the pecking order. I wouldn't say that. There is an opportunity here for Wiggins to certainly be the number 2 scoring option on this team. It wouldn't shock me if by the end of the year, Steph Curry is the top scorer. Obviously, that's going to happen, and then Wiggins is averaging the second most points per game on this team. That wouldn't shock me at all. And if Klay Thompson is more of a catch and shoot guy in his first season back, right? So obviously that depends, but to the point of Andrew Wiggins not taking advantage of space, that was an interesting thing, and it's not something that I've really talked about recently, but you look at Andrew Wiggins last year, and the whole point in acquiring Andrew Wiggins was, number one, he's a better fit than D'Angelo Russell, but I remember when it happened, we were all talking about, well, this guy's a really good cutter, and you saw a bunch of people tweeting film and things about, hey, look how good this guy can cut, and he is a really good cutter. He's a really intuitive cutter, but he did not do that as much last year. In fact, I thought he was settling for a lot of mid-range stuff at times. He obviously wanted to get that three-point shot turned around, that he did. 38% was the best three-point shooting year of his career. And maybe that was the focus, and with that, because you get less cutting. But he did have a career low with 3.4 free throw attempts per game, and only 21.8% of his shots came within 3 feet of the basket last year, which was, again, a career low for him. The Warriors were near the bottom of the league in drives, and they were 21st in free throw attempts. So you could argue, that they need to get to the basket more, and I think you look at some of the things that they did this year, maybe the Jonathan Kuminga pick was influenced by that stat and that need to get bigger and more physical, and the James Wiseman thing in the draft before that too. But they also led the league, or were near the top of the league, in three-point shooting. So it's hard to get both all the time, right? I think Warriors fans got used to having both for a really long time. That's not really always the case. But the Warriors certainly need to improve their offense, right? They were 21st in offensive rating last year, maybe 20th, one of those, by the end of the season. But to get better, it's not going to be three-point shooting, right? Even with Klay coming back, obviously three-point shooting is inching up every single year in the league, but they definitely need to get better at getting to the basket, getting easy shots, and getting to the line, and getting more free throws. That's going to be paramount. And I wonder if Andrew Wiggins playing in more space with Klay Thompson, not that he didn't have a ton of space last year, but more space, and now that three-point shot has come around, maybe he prioritizes getting to the basket a little bit more. And look, I'm telling you, these stats are not secret, right? The Warriors know about these stats, and it wouldn't shock me if at the end of, during Andrew Wiggins' exit interview, that these numbers were brought up, and they said, you know what, Wiggins, that was awesome. Thanks for, it was great that you're, turned around your three-point shot and that you had a career year, but you need to keep continuing that efficiency, but also you need to get to the rim a little bit more because that's what we're going to need from you next season, especially if Klay's coming back and we're going to be, pretty set with the 3-point shooting thing. All right, next question comes from Fresh Donuts. Do the Warriors understand that they need a backup point guard, another ball handler who can possibly attack the basket? They literally have 2 ball handlers who might score. Moses Moody does not count. Do the Warriors understand that they need a backup point guard? I think there was an acknowledgement that they could use a backup point guard, and not getting Patty Mills really hurt them. I think they were willing to use the mid-level exception on a guy like Patty Mills, but then after that, the other point guards on the market kind of quickly went off the market. A guy like Corey Joseph, who I thought would make sense, re-signed with Detroit. Norman Powell ended up getting paid to go back to Portland. There were some guys who I thought made sense for the Warriors, but this was not a great point guard market, right? Like, you had Chris Paul, Mike Conley, Kyle Lowry, but those guys were kind of already spoken for, and the Warriors were never going to be in play for any of those guys. So I just didn't really see the point guard outside of Patty Mills who made a ton of sense. Now, you look at what point guards are available now. Like, do you want Dennis Smith Jr.? Do you want Frank Ntilikina? Do you want Jeff Teague? Do you want Elfrid Payton? I know there are Warriors fans who want Avery Bradley, but as far as a guy who's doing stuff off the bounce and attacking and making things happen on offense, that's not Avery Bradley. Like, he could make open, like, spot up threes, but he's not, like, creating stuff with the ball in his hands. Dante Exum, right? He's 6'6". He could defend a bunch of positions, but he's been a non-factor offensively and can't shoot. So I don't know who the point guard is that's out there that people want. All the top guys have pretty much signed, and we saw this morning that Reggie Jackson signed. It looks like Dennis Schroeder could end up on Boston based on some recent reports. I don't think he's going to settle for the mid-level exception ultimately. So I just don't know who the point guard is that people want anymore. And I'm not defending the Warriors. I think they swung and they missed, and I don't think that should be excused, right? But you just look at who's there, and you just look at the facts right now, and I think that's partly why they brought in Andre Iguodala, and they were so willing to, is because, hey, this guy can handle the ball for us a little bit, and in that starting lineup, you're going to have Steph, you're going to have Draymond basically running that offense, but in that second unit, maybe it's Andre Iguodala and Jordan Poole. Maybe that's what it is, and you hope that you can get a little bit more from Andrew Wiggins as far as a shot creation standpoint. I think that would be really helpful. Wiggins taking that sort of leap and probably attacking the basket like we were just talking about a little bit more and creating stuff with like kickouts and things like that. So that's where I think the Warriors are. I think they swung and missed on point guards. I think that's a miss, right? I would not say when you're doing the final grades on this offseason for the Warriors and for Bob Myers, I don't think you can give them an A, as much as people are going to feel good about Andre Iguodala and say, hey, Otto Porter and Nemanja Bjelica on the minimum are really good values. And whatever you think about what they did in the draft, you can't give them an A because they did not get a point guard, which was a real area of need. At this point, I just don't know who's available. And that's why I could see them maybe bringing back Nico Mannion on a two-way or something like that, maybe using one of those two-ways on a potential point guard, because I think they still need some depth, but it might be past the point of going and getting an experienced guy, and maybe you're using this maybe a two-way spot and maybe more of an experiment. Okay, let's take a quick break here and then continue along with the mailbag here on Locked On Warriors. All right, and we're back. Locked On Warriors here. Mailbag episode on a Friday. Thanks to everybody who is tuning in on YouTube or listening wherever you listen to podcasts. Will writes in, what do you expect the rotation to be until Klay returns? Will Jordan Poole or Damian Lee or somebody else start at shooting guard? So we don't know when Klay is exactly coming back, but from everything I'm hearing, it sounds like November, December could be eventually when he returns. I don't think the Warriors expect Klay to be in the lineup on opening night. And even when Klay does come back, he's probably not getting a full allotment of minutes right away. He's going to need to knock off some rust. He's going to have to ease his way into a regular allotment of minutes, 30 minutes per game, whatever it's going to be. So I do think that the Warriors need to have a contingency plan. Who starts on shooting guard at opening night? I don't think it'll be Jordan Poole. Because I think you want Jordan to come off the bench and run offense for you and be sort of that bench scorer, and you're going to need to maintain the integrity of that rotation. I think what you want ultimately is for somebody to sort of step into that Klay role, and then when Klay does come back, it doesn't like send a ripple effect down the rotation. I think you want to get, just because Klay is out, I think you could still, despite that, create some rotational integrity, kind of get guys settled into roles. I thought that's been a problem for the Warriors over the last 2 or 3 years, is that guys just weren't settled in what roles they played. And if you put Jordan Poole in that starting lineup, for example, and then Klay comes back and you're like, all right, now you have to run the second unit offense, there's going to be another adjustment period for Jordan Poole in that sense, right? So I don't think you want to put him in that situation. I think rather you want to keep, I think you bring in a guy like Damian Lee or Michael Mulder, a guy who might not have a spot in your every night rotation when Klay does play, but can kind of just be your starter, your fill-in starter before Klay comes back. So that way you keep Jordan Poole in that second unit, you keep Andre Iguodala in that second unit, you keep Otto Porter and in that second unit. I think some people are like, oh, Otto Porter could be the new Klay Thompson, size. They could both shoot really well. Size, they're similar. Otto Porter is not a shooting guard. He is more of a 4 than a 2 at this point in his career. I don't think you want him guarding other wings. You could like kind of move Wiggins over to shooting guard and then put Otto Porter at a forward spot and then have Porter guard other bigger guys. But again, we're getting into that situation where, do you really want that to be the case, or would you prefer to kind of nail down a rotation early, and then when Klay comes back, you just say, all right, you're the new shooting guard, and then everything else remains the same? That I could see probably being the best. I don't know what Steve Kerr is going to do, but I could see the reasoning behind that, and I think it would be the best way to go about it. And so I would like a guy like Damian Lee makes a lot of sense. You just put him in at that shooting guard spot. You have Steph, Damian Lee, Wiggins, Draymond, Looney. Look, obviously Damian Lee isn't as good as some of those other guys, but he tries hard on defense. He's a willing ball mover. He can make open threes. I think Michael Mulder could also have something to say about that if he's on the roster. I think one of those guys makes a lot of sense, and I would lean towards Damian Lee. Also because, there's chemistry with those guys. He knows those guys already. He's played with those guys for a few years now. I think it makes a lot of sense. And then when Klay comes back, you just say, all right, Damian Lee, you go back to sort of this limited playing time role. Klay takes his spot. And then, you still have Jordan Poole, Moses Moody, Otto Porter, Iguodala, Kuminga, Wanda Scantleton, all these other guys that you have available off the bench on the perimeter. Jeremy writes in, do you agree that it would be a major disappointment if James Wiseman is not the opening day starter at center? Actually, I disagree completely, Jeremy. I think it would be a major disappointment if James Wiseman was the opening day starter. If Wiseman is starting opening night, this is a guy who is not going to play in Summer League for the second year in a row, who's probably going to miss a part of training camp, even though the Warriors think that he's going to be available at some point during training camp. And they're hopeful that he'll be available at the start of training camp, but we'll see. Coming off of an injury and not really doing anything last year to secure the starting center spot other than just being young, I think it would be a disappointment if the Warriors didn't learn anything from that experience. The fact that lineup with James Wiseman was one of the worst starting lineups in the league, and then you put Kevon Looney in that lineup, and it was one of the better starting lineups in the league. If the Warriors didn't learn from last year's experience, that to me would be disappointing. Like, if Kevon Looney is not starting at center on opening night, Kevon Looney earned the starting center job. And you used picks on guys like Kuminga, who were a little bit more raw, a little bit more farther away from contributing right away. And it sounds like Steph was fine with that because he signed the extension. It sounds like Draymond Green was into it and stuff like that. But I think it would still send the wrong signal to those guys with Klay coming back saying, hey, you know what? All that stuff about you guys being better with Looney in the lineup, we don't care. We still want Wiseman to start at center. I just don't see it. I don't think Wiseman is ready. And also, I think it's unfair to James Wiseman to put that kind of pressure on him again after it clearly affected him last year as a rookie. So I really hope that the Warriors learned from that experience last year. Just start Kevon Looney. We know what it looks like. He's great. He's a perfect center for that starting lineup. He doesn't need the ball. Could defend at a really high level. You get out and start the season strong. That's what you need to do. And then just let Wiseman come along slowly, more organically, more naturally. Don't put so much pressure on him for no reason. There's plenty of time to develop guys. And if you've already sort of said, all right, we want to win now, and our window for these young guys is maybe 2 or 3 years from now, then why rush it, right? With Kuminga, you're acknowledging that your window is 2 or 3 years from now for those guys. So don't rush it. You don't need Wiseman to be this great center right away. Kevon Looney showed last year that he could be your starting center. He bounced back after a rough, injury-plagued season 2 years ago, showed that he could be healthy and be really helpful. So Looney should be the starter. I would be disappointed if he weren't. Final question from Written D, who writes in, are the Warriors considering adding either Ryan Taylor or Salam Mawugbe to a two-way contract? So I really like the Salam Mawugbe guy. I really, really like this guy. 6'10", 6'11", he's huge, okay? And he's super athletic, really strong hands. I've been really impressed with what he's done in these two Sacramento Summer League games, and has a really good shooting percentage. He shot 83% overall last year, and he's basically taking all the shots at the basket, and I love that. I just love when dudes know what they are, right? And Salem knows exactly what he is. He's not trying to be a stretch big. He's not trying to mess around with any of that. He's just like, all right, I'm going to screen hard. I'm going to roll to the basket, and if you give me the ball, I'm really tall and I'm really strong, and I'm just going to put the ball in the basket from like a foot away. And that's his role. Defensively, there's things that he needs to work on. I was talking with some people that work for the Warriors after those Summer League games, and I was asking them, hey, is Salem a guy who can get a two-way? There was a little trepidation there. They say, hey, he still needs to get a little bit more athletic. He still needs to get like really, really in shape, like NBA type of shape, and he's still a little slow defensively. He's still a ways away. But look, you just don't see like traditional type of centers in the G League, right? You don't really see them because people need size, and guys like that are really rare. Like just big dudes are hard to find, and they usually get plucked away from the G League. So I could see them giving him a two-way and playing him on nights where they're going up against a guy like Joel Embiid or Jokic or something like that, and they just need more size. I could see that. Ryan Taylor makes sense. 6'6" guard, can shoot 40% from three-point range. Defensively, there's stuff there that you like. There's obviously the tools to be kind of a 3-and-D guy. The Warriors have liked to have guys like that in the past on two ways and experiment with the guys like that on the end of the roster. So I could definitely see Ryan Taylor. I could definitely see Salem Mawugbe. I could see them bringing back Nico Mannion on one of those two-way contracts. And I can also see them just going off the board if somebody for another G League team or another Summer League team rather, really pops and it's something that they're interested in. I could see them circling the wagon around to somebody else who's not part of their program right now and going kind of off the board and signing a player like that to their two-way. So a lot of options here, but I think Ryan Taylor and Salem Mawugbe are definitely a couple of the options. All right, that'll do it for us today. Remember to subscribe to new episodes of Locked On Warriors on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Comment and leave a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts. It really does help. Tweet about the show. Tell people about the show. Again, it all really helps. And then read my work over at themercurynews.com. You can reach me on Twitter at WC Goldberg. You can email me at wgoldberg@bayareanewsgroup.com. Enjoy your day. Thanks for listening. Have a great weekend, everybody.